This conference is now being recorded.
Thank you all for your patience today. We had just a few technical hiccups. My name is Matthew Darius from New York Gasbo. Welcome to School Building Aid. Our presenters today are Andrea Hirey and Louise Gallery from SCD, and we have Mike Schuster from Financial Planning. Up first, we do have Andrea, and since we're a few minutes late here, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. Thank you very much. Andrea, go ahead.
Good afternoon. Today we're going to be talking about the prospective project report and how you can navigate from that report of individual projects to your building aid output reports to check and make sure that you've got the right amount of assumed debt service and aid. I'll be talking for just a few minutes about the basics, and then Louise will take over and get into the nitty-gritty, and hopefully you've also got with you the page Word document that was sent and another Excel-looking piece of paper for the work that Louise will be doing with you.
Andrea, if I could break in real quick. If anyone doesn't have a handout, I just typed into the chat screen my email address. Please email me and I'll get that right out to you. Thank you.
The only other thing I'd say before I get started is if once Louise gets started and she's going from report to report, if you need us to stop so you can catch up in order to stay with her in terms of what she's doing, please let Matt know right away and we'll back up for you. Otherwise, for more general questions, if you could jot them down and hold them till Louise is done, that would be better. And I think Mike will have a question period at the end of his presentation. So here's an overview of what we're going to be doing today. I'll talk a little bit about the basics, and then Louise will show you the details of the prospective project report and what each entry on that report means. We'll talk a little bit about some general information on that report, and then she will be actually doing a reconciliation of the details on that report to some sample building aid output reports, which are in the materials that you have. And then we will leave plenty of time for some questions. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to be talking about prospective aid today, prospective projects and prospective aid. As many of you might know, that's one of many different types of aid, building aid, that your district may or may not receive, all of which are displayed in items on your output report. They each have their own sections of law and rules and formulas. And again, today, if you see at the top of this slide, we're only going to be talking about prospective aid. We do have a state aid handbook that's right on our homepage. This is the link to it. It's updated every year. And if you're interested, if you see on your output reports that you're getting, for example, retro aid, and you'd like some more information on what the heck that is, then you can go to that handbook, and there's a lot more information about all of that and all of these individual aids. And you can certainly look at that and then give us a call if you have questions about those. Just an overview of the structure of the output reports. Again, we're not sure what the level of experience is in our audience, and we do know that if you're not terribly experienced or haven't looked at them much, they can be quite overwhelming. We have 4 sets of output reports: Build 10, Build 3, and Build 4. They calculate aidable expenses and aid amounts for the current aid year, and each one of those 4 has a corresponding EST report, standing for estimate, which calculates aidable expenses only for the projected year. In other words, we leave it to our modeling folks to actually use those expenses and apply the next year's aid ratios to present projected aid, but we do show you the expenses that we have calculated for the model to use for those aid calculations. The reports are the Bill 10, Bill 3, Bill 4. They're actually distinguished by different aid ratio calculations. That's what makes the difference among all of those. What happened was a new output report was added each time a new aid ratio was enacted by the legislature, but when they did that each time, they only applied it to projects with voter authorization dates after a certain point in time. So each report contains data only for those projects with voter authorization dates within a specified date range. Each report contains items for all of the aid categories that I showed you before, but of course not every district receives aid in every category in every year. So you may see a lot of items on your output reports that have zeros, and that's probably okay because you may not have any leases, so you're not going to show any lease aid, et cetera. We sometimes refer to these aid ratio groups as Tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, and those correspond to Build 10, Build 3, and Build 4. There's also a very important and very convenient, once we realized that they were going to continue adding these aid ratio categories at some point after the second or third one, we said we better put a new report out there that has some summary data so people can take a look at one place and at least get an overview of what's going on with their aid. And that's what happens in the summary report, the Build SBA. It summarizes the aid data from the 4 reports, and it also displays the calculations for the 4 different types of aid ratios that distinguish the reports. And I'm not going to go into this in detail, but for your information, just so you know, here are the specified date ranges for voter authorization dates that identify each output report. And you can look at that. You can use that in conjunction with the materials that Louise will be going over if you want to do some work on your own and look at your own prospective project report. This might help you. And again, put the handbook link at the bottom of this slide again because there is additional information in the handbook about the aid ratio categories. Again, we're going to be talking only about prospective projects. Those are projects with Commissioner's approval date on or after December 1, 2001, or projects with the Commissioner's approval date before that date, but for which initial debt was first issued after December 1, 2001. These projects are aided via what we call assumed amortization, based on 1 or 2 assumed aidable debt service payments per year, and a statewide average, or in some cases, a dormitory authority interest rate if you've done your funding through DASNY. Again, anytime we refer to debt service in this presentation today, we are always talking about an assumed debt service, part of the assumed amortization, and not for actual debt service arrangements or payments, that sort of thing. We assume that your actual payments are to some degree aligned with your assumed payments and aid, so that you can stay in sync and get funded according to what you're paying out each year. But again, there's no direct relationship, and we're always talking about this assumed debt service. The last bullet here is kind of important because a lot of you probably know that there was a pretty major change enacted recently whereby for projects that receive SED approval after July 1, 2011, the aid on those projects is going to start and flow differently than for projects that are approved by SED before July 1, 2011. Currently, your aid starts to flow according to some criteria, but it also involves your contract signing date, or the date you notify us that your contract has been signed. In the future, the aid will start without the specific later of this or that. It's going to be more dependent on when your final cost report and certificate of substantial completion are received. So again, I just want to emphasize that everything we're talking about today is related to the projects that are approved before July 1, 2011. We have been working extensively on guidance regarding the new rules, and that should be forthcoming shortly, but it's not. We will not be discussing it today. Okay, that's all I've got to say, and I'm going to switch seats here, and Louise is going to talk about the prospective project report and take you through some reconciliation activity.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to start going through the prospective report and the basic setup of the report. So if you could take your handout, the 11-page Word document, and look at page 1 of 11, and the page numbers are in the bottom left of that document. And we're going to just go over the general setup to begin. So the projects are listed in numeric order by the building project number. So if you have many projects and many pages in your prospective report, then you know that if you need to look for information on a particular project, that they're listed in numeric order by project number. And many different items are on the report that are pertinent information for that project. One of them being the PPU, or the period of probable usefulness, and that would be a 15-year if it's a reconstruction project, 20 years for an addition project, 30 years for a new project. Also, the interest rate that's being used for that particular project, the statewide rate or the DASNY rate, if the project was funded via DASNY, and DASNY has submitted that interest rate to us at SCD. And the statewide rate is based on the commissioner approval date of that particular project. The amortized principal is showing. The assumed debt service amounts are listed for each project for which a 139 has been processed. The voter authorization date, as Andrea had spoke about, determining which aid ratio is applied for the aid calculation and therefore in which output report that project's debt service will be displayed. And the output report category is listed next to the VAD on the prospective report. Now, if we look at page 1 of 11 and we look at project 129, for example, we see the voter authorization date is 5/1/01 on the second line. And then right to the right, you see the Build 3 category listed, identifying it as a Build 3. And the number of assumed payments, 1 or 2, is determined by whether the initial debt service start year date, and that date is the later of the commissioner approval date plus 18 months, or the 139 receipt date, whether that falls within the first or second half of the aid year. If that date falls between July 1st and December 31st, there'll be 2 payments in the first and last aid year, and if it falls in the second half of the year between January 1st and June 30th, there'll be 1 payment. And just to give you an example, again, looking at project 129, if you look at line 4, you see the two assumed payments in the initial start year of July 2007. Now, to come up with that July 2007 initial start year, you have to take your commissioner approval date plus 18 months, and in this case, the commissioner approval date is 7/19/02 for this project. You add the 18 months, you get February 19th, 04. Then you compare that date to the 139 receipt date, which is on the last line to the right, and you'll see the 139 receive date of 9/18/07. The later date being 9/18/07, and therefore, since that date falls within the 07-08 age year, that's your start date, July 07. And because that date is a September date, there are two assumed payments. Now, some other items to note, again, various pertinent dates, the commissioner approval date listed, the voter authorization date, the contract sign date is listed, and then the all-important SA 139 receive date. Then just some general items to note. If the 139 has not been received and processed by the date of the report, in the upper right-hand corner of the report, and if we look at page 1, we see the date is 1/17/12 in our example. If you see that the comment, no SA 139 has been received for this project, will be displayed if we, at the date of that report, did not have that information processed. Now, the report is updated periodically, but the SA 139 may have been received and processed, but just not yet updated to the report. So if you had a question regarding a project that shows that comment, feel free to contact the State Aid Office to check the status of that project. Now, a project should first appear on the prospective report after project approval. That is, after the SA4 approval has been processed. If a project is not listed on the prospective report and you believe that it is a prospective project and therefore it should be listed, then you can contact the State Aid Office again and to check the status of that project. Now, please note that the projects receiving capital outlay exception aid, the $100,000 or less, or emergency projects should not be listed on this report. And again, you can contact the State Aid Office with any questions regarding those. And also an important note, the prospective report displays aid data for all prospective projects with SA 139 data on file, whether or not the initial aid year payment has been or will be deferred to a subsequent aid year. So that is basically saying that you can't look at this report and automatically know whether or not you have a deferral project. Some more general comments to note regarding the prospective report. If there is zero showing for assumed debt service for a project, it can mean one of two things. The first thing is that the project is being aided, but it's being aided as an amortized capital outlay project. In this case, there will be a link entitled Click Here for Capital Outlay Information, which will bring you to that preliminary capital outlay amortization report, and that's where you'd find the assumed debt service for that project. So if we look again at our sample document on page 1 and look at project 128, the first project on the report, you'll see there is zero debt service listed, and sure enough, there's a link at the bottom, Click Here for Capital Outlay Information. When you click on that link, it will bring you, if you go to page 7 of 11, it would bring you to the preliminary capital outlay amortization report, and then you will see the project information listed there and the assumed annual aidable expense listed there. So if you see that link, it's getting the amortized capital outlay aid. The other situation could be that the project is not being aided, and there's a variety of reasons, and a couple that to mention here. The project could be ineligible for aid. There was no capacity, there were ineligible costs, etc. Could have been a late final cost report was processed, and therefore the approved project cost was deleted. Or the contract sign date is before the commissioner approval date, and therefore no aid is calculating, because the contract sign date cannot be before the commissioner approval date. If you have questions on those, you can contact the State Aid Office immediately to verify. And if we refer to page 6 of 11 on our 11-page document, and we look at project 5013-003, you see the zeros for the debt service there. You do not see the link for the capital outlay. So therefore, it's pretty safe to say that there's an issue with the project and its aidability. And if you look at this project, the commissioner approval date is before the contract sign date in this particular example, so that isn't the problem for this particular project. Now, reconciling the prospective report to the current building aid output report. The first thing you'd want to do is to identify all your projects that fall under one or more of the 4 possible output report categories: the build, Bill 10, Bill 3, and Bill 4. And you'd want to group the projects by the aid category. And then add up the appropriate assumed debt service for the projects in each category for the aid year being reconciled by taking the debt service under the appropriate aid year column on the 3rd line of the prospective report. And our headings that are titled July in a year, the interim year, and your July and your last year of aid. Now, 2 examples. If we were selecting the assumed debt service for the 11-12 reconciliation, if we go to page 3 of 11, and we look at the first project, project 320, and you see we're trying to reconcile again the 11-12 debt service. So we are going to use the assumed debt service under the first column, the July 2011 column, and we're going to pick up that $22,513 figure since we're in the 11-12 year. In this case, we would not be using the interim year, the $45,026, because that is for the aid for all the in-between years, in between the first and last year. Now, if we look at project 524, 2 projects down, here we are going to use the middle interim year column of $734,428, because again we're reconciling the 2011-12 aid year, and the first column showing is July 2010. So we would want to make sure that we selected from the interim year to get the 11-12 debt service amount. Now, if you go through and you categorize all your projects under all the categories, and those totals are not reconciling to the output report amounts, then deferral of aid may be the reason. So what is deferral? Deferral is a statutory measure to increase the accuracy of the building aid projections statewide. For example, if an initial aid on a project is due to start in the 2012-13 year, it will not be paid during 2012-13 aid year unless the SA-139 was received in state aid in time to be included in the November 15, 2011 frozen data file. If the 139 was not received in time for that November 2011 frozen data file, then the first year of aid payments will be deferred to at least July 2013, or maybe later, depending on when the 139 is actually received. And please note that this provision is still in effect. This deferral, SA-139 deferral, is still in effect for projects approved after June 30th, 2011, for which aid is not due to start until both the final cost report and the CSC, Certificate of Substantial Completion, have been received. Deferral of initial building aid payments. If a project or projects will be deferred due to the SA-139 receipt date, then either 1 single deferral or 2 double deferral years of aid will be deferred to a future year. The deferred assumed debt service amounts can be found on the previous aid year's building estimate output reports, or the EST reports. And you would check the applicable EST report depending on the category, Build, Bill 10, Bill 3, Bill 4. If you look at page 9 of 11 of your Word document, you will see a couple of examples of of some EST reports. The first one at the top of the page is the 2010-11 EST report, and the bottom, the 2011-12, just a portion of the EST reports. And we will be going over those a little bit more in detail in a few minutes. The deferred aid amounts can be found on the building summary of building aid, or the Build SBA output report for the year the deferral aid is to be paid. For example, if it's 2010-11 aid was deferred and paid in July 2011, then that will be found on the 2011-12 SBA report. And if you look at page 10 of 11, line 5 has to do with the deferral, and that's just a portion of the Build SBA report. And it will show you on line 5A the deferred amount that's payable in July 2011 and in the July separate July deferred payment. 5B is the amount that was actually paid in that July payment. And 5C, if there's any change in that project during that year, then it will be reconciled with the during the regular aid of that year. So if the 51,972 was paid and line 5A changed, the project cost changed because you submitted other documentation, other aid data, and that amount increased to 60,000, then that difference would be shown in line C, and it would be paid throughout the year, throughout that aid year. And next to just as a reference for you, we have a deferral chart for the last couple of years of debt service. An important note, the SA 139 submission deadline of mid-October has been in place for the last few years and will continue to be for guaranteed inclusion in the November data file. Typically it's October 15th, but it's somewhere in that range, and we always have that information out on our website. And I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about this chart, but just to kind of give you an overview, the first column will give you that initial aid start year that we talked about that is on the prospective report. And in order to get regular building aid, the 139 had to have been in by that previous November's database, which would be in column 2. And then if it was not, then there is either single deferral, which is columns 3 and 4, or double deferral, which is the last 2 columns. And there's nothing further past double deferral. If the 139 still wasn't in, then that initial debt service would move up a year to the next year. Now, to review a sample reconciliation, there's color coding for anyone who had the color printer and was able to print this out in color. Pink for the Build 3 data, blue for any Build 4 data, red for deferral data, and the deferral all happened to be Build 4 in our example that we're doing today. Yellow was the amortized capital outlay project, and also for no one SA 139. And the items are also underlined and bolded for ease in seeing the sample data, or in case you didn't have a color printer. Now, the sample Build 3 data reconciliation. Again, if we look at our document, our Word document, and we look at page 1 of 11, and we see project 128, there are only 3 Build 3 projects on our sample document. And this is a pretty straightforward example here. Project 128, as we talked about earlier, is our amortized capital outlay project. So we see the link, and when we click on that link and go to page 7 of 11, as we did a short time ago, we would see our annual aidable debt service for that project. And just to carry it a little further, so on page 7 of 11, we see our $76.98 for that particular project. And then if we look at page 8 of 11, we will see a sample Build 3 report. And if we look at line 10, then you will see that 7698 showing there on the Build 3 report for the amortized capital outlay. Now the next project, Project 129, is the only one of the 3 Build 3 projects in our sample report that is actually getting the regular prospective aid. And Project 129 is the project that we also looked at earlier. We are in the interim year for an 11-12 reconciliation that we're doing. So we look at that $72,536 under the interim year for Project 129. And if we go to page 8 of 11, again, to that Build 3 output report again, we will see that on line 7, there is the prospective debt service for that particular project. If other projects, if there were more Build 3 projects that were getting regular prospective aid in the 11-12 year, that number would be bigger. It would be the total of all of those projects. And then last, for the Build 3, Project 5013002. If you look at page 6 of 11, and there is our comment in yellow if you have the color. SA 139 has not been received for this project. So there's no 139, therefore no assumed debt service will be showing on the output report for that project. And so that is the reconciliation of the Build 3 in this example. Now to the sample Build 4 data reconciliation. This reconciliation will encompass also the deferral aid as well. And at this time, if you would take your Excel spreadsheet, the Appendix A in the upper right, it's called Appendix A, and this is actually a detail of the Build 4 projects that are on this report. And again, the blue, we've got the blue for Build 4 and the red for the deferral pieces. So if you look at that sample document, the 11 pages in the Excel spreadsheet file, Appendix A, and we're going to review all Build 4 projects listed on the sample perspective report, which is pages 1 of 11 through 6 of 11, and we're going to compare them to the Excel spreadsheet on Appendix A to see all the projects that are listed with and without deferrals. And on Appendix A, I had noted the output report references there, and we'll be reviewing these sample output reports in the Word document that will tie back to show where those totals are on the output reports. So to begin the Build 4 reconciliation, if we look at Appendix A and we look at the first chart, every project that is listed on our 6-page prospective report is listed here in numeric order. And the second column of our top chart, 2011-12 debt service, and that is showing you every project here on the prospective report, and if they have 11-12 debt service, that is going to be aided in 11-12. And then I have a comment column to explain various items that we'll be going through, whether or not there's deferral, whether or not, for whatever other reason, there is no debt service showing in 11-12 for that particular project. And then as we go through each one, if you look down below, we're also going to be seeing where that project is getting reconciled as far as the deferral aid for that particular project. So if we start and look at page 1 of 11 of the prospective report, the Word document, we see project 130 is the first project on the bottom of the page, the first Build 4 project that we have. And for the 2011-12 debt service, if we look at the blue, the interim year, again, because we're in 2011-12, we've got $57,874. Now, if you have the color, you'll see that the July 2010 is in red. That 2010-11 debt service is being deferred to July 2011. And if you look at that project on the page 1 of 11 on the prospective report, and you look at the 139 receive date, you see that the July 2010 initial debt service would have had to have had its 139 in by the November '09 database. However, this project, the 139, was received in September 2010. Therefore, that 1011 debt service amount is going to be deferred to July 2011. So, in terms of the 1112 debt service, I put the 57,874. It's there in blue in the top chart. In addition, the 1011 debt service, if you look down to the deferral section, and you will see project 130 is listed as the first project. And I've listed 2010-11 debt service, and there's the 57,874. And as you see, there's going to be a few other projects that are going to go into that ultimate total for the deferral there. Now, if we move on to the next page, page 2 of 11, you'll see project 133. Project 133 is the only project in this example that we have a double deferral. So if you look at the July 2010 and the interim years, you see that they're both in red. This project had an initial start year of July 2010. However, the 139 receive date was not until May of 2011. So it did not come in for the November '09 or the November 2010 database. Therefore, the 1011 and the 1112 debt service is double deferred. So we have a 0 for our 1112 debt service, and then if we go down to the deferral piece, these are being deferred to July 2012. So under July 2012 deferral, you'll see that I have project 133 listed on its own for the 1011 debt service, and then again listed under the 1112. The 1011 is our beginning of $53,965. If you look at page 2 of 11, you'll see the July 2010 debt service is that figure. And then the interim year is the $107,930, and that is under the 1112 debt service. The reason that they're separated out is because on the output report, they're going to be listed on 2 separate lines. The next project, 134, and then in the next 2 projects, 134 and 136, right after each other. Both of them have 0 for their 1112 debt service. Both of these are being deferred to July 2012. Again, they should have started in July 2011 if the 139 had been received in time, but the 139s came in August 2011 and September 2011. They had to have been in by November 2010. So we have 0s under our 1112 debt service, and we have the deferral amounts for the July 2011 piece, and they're listed down below as well. Then we have many projects here, project 319 through project 526, so we can just kind of scroll through. These projects are all scheduled to start in July 2011 in the 1112 year, and the 139s were received in time by the November 10 database. So as we go through project 319 and we go to page 3 of 11 and continue and look at project 320, 421, 524, 526, we're seeing that they're all in blue if you have the color printer, and we're selecting the July 2011 debt service amount listed there. Continue on to page 4 of 11. We've got project 527 and 528. Again, 139s were in on time, and so the 1112 debt service is listed. Then we get to project 1135 and 1136, and we can see that again, the 1112 debt service is being listed. We've listed the interim year in the chart. However, the July 2010 is in red. They're being deferred to July 2011. So these projects would have started in the 10-11 year, but the 139 wasn't submitted in time, so they're being deferred to the July 11 year. And they are listed under the July 2011 deferral, projects 1135 and 1136. Listed there under project 130. Then we continue on to page 5 of 11, project 1138. getting regular 1112 aid. And 1139, we have another, it's getting 1112 aid for Project 1139, but there's also a deferral again. The July 10, the 1011 debt service is also being deferred to July 11, and again, that was placed, the July 2010 amount of 35,806 was placed down into the July 11 deferral. And the normal 1112 debt service of 35,806 is still in the column for the 1112 debt service in our top chart. In Project 1141, the aid is not starting until July 2012. So if we look at our initial start year of July 2012 in black, so therefore there's no 1112 debt service, so we have a 0, because that will normally start next year. Project 1142, no 1112 debt service. No 1112 debt service, that is being deferred. The July 11 debt service is being deferred to July 2012. So the July 2012 deferral piece at the bottom of the page under the 1112 debt service, at the very bottom of the page, you'll see that project 1142's debt service is included there. And then we get to page 6 of 11, and we look at project 5013003, and this is the project that we talked about earlier, where there was no debt service listed and there was no capital outlay link, and that project happens to be a non-aidable project, so no debt service will be included there. So then we have our first total. For the 1112 debt service, we have a total of $1,485,759, and that is showing what should be the regular 1112 billed for effective debt service. And if we look at page 11 of 11 on our Word document, we'll see line 3 of the effective report will show that $1,485,759. Now, if we look more at the deferral pieces, the July 2011 deferral. So all the projects that we had that had 1011 debt service that were being deferred to July of 11, the debt service added up to $122,576. And if you look at page 9 of 11, you'll see that that amount will be showing on the 1011 Bill 4S, which is at the top of the page, line 5. And there's the $122,576 showing the 1011 assumed debt service that will be deferred and paid in July of 11. And then if we multiply that by the aid ratio, the actual aid is $51,972. And if you look at page 10 of 11, again, there is the actual aid that's going to be paid in the 1112 aid year for that deferred debt service. Now, if we look at the July 2012 deferral, we had the double deferred project 133, that $53,965 of their 1011 debt service, and then that project is also included in the 1112 debt service in the column right below that. That, along with a few other projects that were also being deferred to July 2012. So if we look at page 9 of 11, and we look at the bottom, the 1112 est report, we'll see that there's two different lines, one for the 1112 assumed debt service, that's the $1,244,561, and then the 1011 debt service on line 7 for that project that was double deferred, the $53,965. Now, those those deferral pieces will be showing on the SBA, on the 1213 SBA, because they're July 2012 deferrals. They'd be paid as part of the 1213 aid, and the July 1213 output reports are not yet available. So that would be showing on the SBA line 5 when those output reports come out. So that is the end of the reconciliation of the output reports to the prospective report. So I'm not sure if we're going to have questions now. I guess we'd have questions now on anything that Andrea or I had gone through.
Matt, are there any questions?
Just double checking here for you. There were two questions. They want to know if there would be a presentation for projects with CAD after 7/1/2011.
We haven't planned a presentation yet. We're just getting our guidance document finalized, but it's certainly something we do webinars from here as well, and we could certainly look into it once the guidance document is released.
Okay. Next, we have a question from Darren. He says, so only way we know deferral is by checking the SA 139 date?
Right. You'd have to check there's a couple of different ways you could go about it. One, right, you would want to use that chart and compare the initial start year date on your prospective report with your 139 receive date. So if you look at your initial start date of, for example, July 2007, you know that you have to have had that 139 in by November of 2006. And if you look at your 139 receive date and it was not in by that November database, then it is likely deferred. In addition, you can also look at your EST reports to see if there's any deferral amounts showing on those lines of the EST report. And then you can go back and reconcile on the prospective report which projects, are included, and you should be able to reconcile the debt service to that. And you can also...
We have a question from Sylvia. How is the assumed debt service on each project calculated? I don't mean the interest rate in years. I mean the allowable costs.
How? You mean as in relation to the total cost? Yeah. That's more of a facilities planning issue and dealing with the project manager in terms of what your actual costs are and what they end up, your capacity and what they end up allowing as an approved cost for aid, but covering that today. If there's a specific project that you see on there and you see the cost that's being aided in the amortized principal area of the prospective project report for that project, and for example, you think, well, my project cost $500,000. Why am I only approved for aid for $200,000, or why is the amortized principal only $200,000? Then I think the best thing to do is contact facilities planning, your project manager, and have them explain how they arrived at that number.
Okay. We have a question from G. How are deferrals reflected in the governor's executive run?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, the executive run shows 2 years worth of aid. For example, this year's executive run shows the 11-12 aid and the estimated 12-13 aid. So bear with me, I'm thinking out loud. The 11-12 section of the executive run would be showing you aid that was deferred from either 09-10 or 1011 and actually paid as part of 1112 aid. So that aid would be included in there. The 1213, let's see, the 1213 aid would show, give me a minute to let me figure it out and move to the next question, and then I'll come back to you while you're talking, okay?
Okay, let's see.
If I can't do that, then let Mike start, and we'll definitely address it by the end. I just need to figure it out.
Okay. Let's see. If there are multiple contracts with different dates, what determines the contract date?
Okay. The contract sign date that is submitted should be the first general construction contract that is signed.
Okay. From Michelle, can you give some examples of costs that would be disallowed?
Okay, costs that would be disallowed. Are we talking about the example about projects that did not have aidable costs?
Michelle, if you want to ask this question in over the phone, please hit £7, and then we can get a little more information from you.
What I can say though is that the ineligible costs in general are determined by facilities planning when they do the project approval. They disallow certain costs, and those costs come over from their system to ours. So if you did have specific questions about an ineligible cost for a particular project, you should contact your project manager.
Okay, Michelle, you're actually live. Go ahead.
Yeah, she just answered my question. That was what I was.
Okay. Great, thanks. And let's see. From Jackie, we have, in January 2012, we made corrections in data on file with SED, which resulted in additional aid to our district. When would these changes be reflected in the output reports?
Okay, so the changes were done in January 2012. If the changes are not showing yet, then they would be showing the next time that the output reports are updated, and I don't have an exact time frame. It should be soon, but I'm not quite sure what the exact time frame will be.
Okay, that's all the questions we have.
Oh, excuse me, 1 second. Just let me confirm. We've been not listed in a database, right? So not listed in May 1. We know we have a database.
Right. Okay, right. So yeah, we're not exactly sure of the exact time frame, but it would definitely be before the May database in May, but more likely earlier than that. Yeah, but that would be the latest. We never go longer updates than between our frozen files, which are November, February, May, and August. And often we do it more than that. It's kind of a staff resource issue for getting that done. So when did you say the changes were submitted? January.
It said January 2012.
January.
Yeah. We haven't had an update.
Oh, okay. That's a good example. If you look at the page 1 of 11 that Louise was working from, you see that the last report was updated on January 17th. So assuming the changes were processed by facilities planning after that, we haven't updated since that time yet. It sounds like it's an instance where it might have been just around the time that we did the last pull, and maybe the work was submitted, the changes were submitted just after that.
Okay. That is all the questions I have.
Okay, I can go back to your, how is the deferral shown on the 1213 aid portion of the executive budget run?
Okay.
I figured that out while we were talking here.
Right ahead.
If the expense is showing up in the deferral areas on the 1112 EST report that's out there now. If there's expense showing up there as 1112 estimated deferred expense, that means that it will be picked up and have an aid ratio applied to it for prospective 1213 aid on the executive run. Okay, that means, in that instance, it means that the 139 didn't make it into the November 2010 database, which means that the 1112 was supposed to start in 1112, and if it came in after that, we know that it's deferred to 1213. So it will show up on the 1112 EST report as expense and be aided in 1213. However, if you missed the November 2011 database frozen file, if the 139 wasn't in this past November 2011, then that would mean that it's aid that was supposed to start in 1213 would actually be deferred to July of 2013. So that's the 13-14 aid year. So that's not going to show up on the executive budget run because we're only projecting as far as 1213 aid. It's pretty complicated, so if whoever asked that question has, is really looking at their data, looking at the executive run and not sure what's there, they should definitely call Louise, and Louise can kind of do this reconciliation, but with the district's own data to make sure they understand what's going on. But that's the general answer. If it's showing up on the 1112 EST reports, it's going to be picked up and aided for 1213 projections. If not, then it's either in the correct year or it missed this past November 2011, and it's really going to be deferred to 13-14. And thank you for your patience while I figured that out.
All right, thank you very much. We have no other questions. Mike, you there?
Yes, I am, Matt.
Okay. Our next presenter is Mike Shizza from Financial Advisors and Marketing Incorporated. Mike, it's all yours.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon, everybody, and greetings from beautiful downtown Syracuse. I'm here with Fiscal Advisors and Marketing. Just a little brief history. I spent 25 years as a business official and 11 years as a teacher. And the frightening thing is I actually understand everything that Andrea and Louise went through. So it gives you some idea that I probably should get a life. But we work here at Fiscal Advisors. I've got Mike Visconti with me, one of my colleagues here, and we spend our time doing capital project work for school districts with the ultimate goal to get the final building project reports filed on time. Judy Johnson is out in Canandaigua, and her goal, job on a daily basis, is to file SA 139s and monitor the state aid for school districts as well. So we provide a lot of services for districts to keep all the data flowing and all the aid coming in the right order. What I want to do today is just go through some of the things you should do to maximize your building aid. Over my 25 years, I had, dozens of capital projects in 3 different districts, and I learned by my mistakes what I should and what I should not do to get the building aid flowing correctly. So the first slide up, which says record keeping, project files, there are facilities planning documents, and there are state aid documents that need to be filed and monitored. Any document that begins with the letters FP is a facilities planning document, and any document with SA is a state aid document. So at the beginning of a project, the district files a letter of intent, which will set up the project number, facilities planning, assign a project manager, and get the process rolling. Once the planning has been done, once the vote has been held and approved, the architect then has to submit a stack of documents to facilities planning, and the first one is called an FPF, which is the application for approval of final project. That is a very important document. There are all kinds of documents with it. The point I'm trying to make here is that the district needs to have copies, maintain a file by project, and have every one of these documents handy for future use. There's also a document called an FPFI, which is a revision of financial information document that we prepare here at Fiscal Advisors if you use our service, or you can prepare yourself. If the original estimated cost of the project is going to be exceeded, you have to file that document showing where the additional monies are going to come from. In terms of the state aid documents, once a project is approved at facilities planning, the financial information goes over to state aid, and then that office sends an SA4 document, which contains all the cost estimates, the building aid units, a lot of information about that project for your review. The district then has to complete an SA-139, which is done after bids are taken and contracts are awarded, which will revise the cost estimates. And one thing I want to emphasize there is the timing of that. You heard that constantly from Louise, that if the SA-139 is filed late, it's going to delay the payment of aid. You need to get that SA-139 done on time, either yourselves or using somebody like us to get that data done. It also should reflect the bid numbers and much better cost estimates than the original cost. I know we have one architectural firm listening, so I can't say too many negative things about architects, but their cost estimates usually change once the bids are taken, and you want to get the updated data on the 139. Once that goes to state aid, they calculate a set of numbers called the maximum cost allowances, and those come back to you on an SA-130. Those need to be reviewed and monitored throughout the project, because if you exceed those cost allowances, everything that you spend above those is not going to be aided. So that's another very important document that you need to have for each of your projects. And if you're using Excel, the SA-139 is really your application to get the project established with an Excel allocation, and that comes back to you along with the SA-130. So in terms of the record keeping, there should be a file for each project that you've got, and all of these documents should be in that file so that they can be retrieved, because when you're going to file the final building project report, you need to go back to some of these documents. In terms of project data submission, we're going to advance the slide. On that FPF, and this goes back to the question that Michelle had earlier about some things that are not allowable costs, and the types of things that we see that cause problems for school districts can come early on that FPF form that is completed by the architect. I need to emphasize that the district is really the responsible party for that form and needs to look at a few things, one of which is the source of funds. Even if the district is going to use capital reserve monies on a project, they are really budgetary appropriations. If the architect or the district puts on that FPF that you're using capital reserve, that is going to get looked at facilities planning as not aided. So if you look at the accounting mechanisms with the capital reserve, it is held in the general fund. It needs to be appropriated from the general fund over to the capital fund, so that really makes it truly a budgetary appropriation. So don't have any monies under capital reserve as a source of funds on the FPF. On the second page of the FPF, under the cost estimates, equipment. If the architect or the district puts in there a budgetary amount for equipment in the alteration renovation column, that is going to be excluded for aid right up front. You'll get a pink slip back with the approval stating that that's been removed from the aid. You can get equipment in new spaces, but you can't get equipment in an alteration renovation unless you're creating a new space. If you're taking 2 or 3 classrooms and turning them into a library, yes, you can furnish the library. Or if you're taking a standard classroom and turning it into a science laboratory or some type of other facility use where you need new equipment, that's one thing. But if all you're doing is buying replacement furnishings under equipment in an alteration renovation, that will not be aided. Also, architects and construction managers like to have contingency amounts of money both on the construction and incidental side of a project. That's all well and good, but they shouldn't put those on the FPF. If they put a line in there that says contingency, 100,000, 200,000, whatever they put, that will be not aided in that manner. You're going to have to show later that you used it. So it's better to avoid it up front and have all the numbers in, the 4 prime contracts or another contract or the normal incidental numbers. So those are some tricks on the FPF to avoid any problems with losing aid. The SA-139 I mentioned earlier, you really want that to be a good projection, as accurate as you can be, of where the project is going to end up. I know with the bid numbers, you don't know the change orders that are coming, so you have to inflate those numbers somewhat to account for change orders. But if you grossly overestimate the project costs on the SA-139, that number is going to get amortized in on that prospective project amortization. Your aid is going to start flowing much higher than it should be, and eventually you're going to have a huge, possibly, give back of overpayment of building aid. So you want to get that as close as you can without going over. If you grossly underestimate it, and then your actual project comes in much higher, then you're going to have a loss of aid initially, an underpayment, and you know and I know in this day and age, when are you going to get that? That may not be coming too quickly. So again, you don't want the overpayment, but you don't want the underpayment either. And on Excel, you get one shot at Excel. It goes on the SA-139. It cannot be any bigger than the local share of the project. So if you've got an 80% aid ratio, Excel cannot exceed 20% of the project estimate, or ultimately the actual project. So if you overestimate the project, you can overestimate Excel, and when the final cost report is filed and Excel is recalculated, if you've been paid too much Excel, it is taken back and you can't use it on any other project. If you underestimate it, and you could have used more and you ultimately forfeit Excel money because you didn't use it, that's not good either. So the whole thing is with the SA-139, try to make those numbers as accurate as you possibly can so that the aid you get is, at the end of it, going to be very close to what you actually deserved. In terms of the closeout, the certification of substantial completion form, every project has a certification of substantial completion. Sometimes there are intermediate ones. If you build an addition and you need to get in the addition, the architect files a certification of substantial completion, but only for the addition. That doesn't start the clock. But once the architect files the certification of substantial completion, which requires signatures by the district, the date of substantial completion starts a clock. And the calendar year of that date determines when the final building project report is due. It is due June 30 of the subsequent calendar year with a 1-year automatic extension. So if any of you have projects out there right now that the final building project reports have not been filed for, and it's got a substantial completion date of 2010, you've got till this June 30 to get that final report done, or you will end up with a total loss of aid. So that is a very critical document, and we always ask our clients to let us see it before it's sent in so we can make sure they're not going to be into trouble with the filing of the report. And again, the final building project report ultimately determines how much aid you get on a project. With this new change in the statute, and I know there were a couple questions about it, if commissioner's approval was after July 1 of last year, no aid is going to flow until that final building project report is completed and submitted. So again, the necessity of getting that done as quickly as possible after the conclusion of a project is even now more essential. So we also submit for our clients new SA-139 when we submit a final building project report. That way, at least the state aid folks, Andrea's office with Louise and Lynn, can see that new form and can re-amortize the cost of the project based on the actual cost. So it'll at least get your aid corrected much earlier than waiting for the final building project report to be reviewed at facilities planning. I don't know who's doing that down there now. The gentleman who was doing it is no longer there, and he was about a year and a half behind on reviewing those. So we like to send in a new final version of the SA-139 at closeout. I'm looking at a couple of questions, Matt. Somebody sent an FPFI to SCD in October to include Excel aid. Received the SA form return. Commissioner still not approved the project for Excel aid. How long should it take to get the approval? What I would do, Kevin, if I were you, I would get a hold of the project manager at facilities planning and contact him directly or her, because that's the person who does the initial approval of a project for Excel. If it wasn't done initially, they're going to need more information than an FPFI. They're going to need to see from the architect the detailed project description with the cost to make sure that 75% of the cost of that project is for items that qualify for Excel. So I would get a hold of the project manager immediately and ask what other documents he or she will need to get that done. And this is from Nikki, what did he say the FP and SA4 were called? FPFI stands for Facilities Planning Financial Information, and that is the revision of financial information form. It is used when the initial cost estimates for a project are too low and additional funds are going to have to be used to pay for the project. The SA4 is a state aid document. It condenses all of the information from the original application form, the FPF form, into one sheet. It also puts on it the number of building aid units that were calculated by the project manager of facilities planning. It's really a summary document from state aid that says, hey, this is everything that we got from facilities planning. Please review this and make sure these numbers are right. We got another one. If the transfer from general to capital was done in a prior year, is it still considered a budgetary appropriation? If you move money from the general fund to capital fund, you did it through one of those budget codes in the 9000s. Forgive me for not remembering it. Called transfer to capital fund, and that's exactly what a budgetary appropriation is. Yes, that's from Mary Ann. Anything else going to pop up?
Nope, I've got no other questions for you.
Beautiful. If you do have questions for me, if you look at the cover sheet of my slides there, whoops, we didn't put our phone number on there, but I do have an email address of mshuzda@fiscaladvisors.com. Just give me an email and we'll answer your questions as best we can.
All right. Actually, did you answer if a transfer from general capital?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay, great. That's that. Mike, thank you very much. Andrea, thank you very much. We appreciate it. If anyone's missing any of the handouts or has any questions, please feel free to email me and I can pass on to presenters. And thank you very much on behalf of ASCO for being here.
An email.
All right. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Everyone else, have a great day.
The moderator has ended the conference. Goodbye. Thank you for calling.